Yeah, so growing up, I've always been what I like to call a nature queer. Like, I've always been looking at nature from a lens of believing that there's more than what meets the eye and what I'm told is there. And so I've always kind of like approached nature from a curious standpoint of like, okay, yeah, I know scientists tell me this, this, and this about these species, but like, is there more that we're not seeing? You know, and that's kind of been my lens across looking at wildlife in general with my work as well.
What do you do when you come out as LGBTQ and love the outdoors? What do you do when you see the outdoor space ruled by older white cis men and desire a diverse community of outdoor lovers? Accept it, change it, create it. I am Justin Yoder, and this is LGBT Outdoors. What's up, everyone? I am Justin with LGBT Outdoors Podcast, and I am accompanied by my husband, Patrick, today.
Hey,
Patrick?
Everybody.
How's your day going?
Oh, man, it's been a lot. Okay, so my spring and summer have been like nearly dead. And then starting this weekend, I'm going what feels like nonstop for close to 2 months straight. For our guests, that's probably kind of normal for them. But for me, after being so slow all spring and summer, anyway, like lots of gigs and work and stuff coming up that I've got to prepare for, but also preparing for LGBT Outdoor Fest, which is this upcoming weekend.
It is. I
know. You just cringe at that.
I'm excited and relieved, I guess, because the last 2 months have just been go for me and for us to get all that together. Right. But if you are listening, you only have a few days left to register for LGBT Outdoor Fest 2023, which is going to be at Rainbow Ranch in Groesbeck, Texas. And I am super excited about it. It's going to be our biggest one yet. And we have some amazing instructors, amazing entertainment, and it's going to be a blast getting out there and camping. We haven't been camping in a while because we've been roasting, so I'm excited about that.
This is true. And if you can't make it this year, pay attention to our socials and everything. We're going to be posting like crazy. And if you've had any questions in the world, like what is this Outdoor Fest business that they won't shut up about? Like, hopefully you'll get a peek into what it is. This particular upcoming one is a camping weekend. But really, it's just about getting outdoors in community, celebrating the queer community in a safe, inclusive environment. And it's going to be freaking awesome. And I can't wait.
Yeah. So if you want to check it out, go to our website, lgbtoutdoors.com/outdoorfest, and all the details are there. Real quick, I also want to, before we jump into with our guests, I want to mention that our ambassador program, which is also who leads our local chapters, has been exploding
in a good way.
In a good way. Ever since I was on the National Parks After Dark podcast back in June. So I just want to let everybody know that we do have chapters now in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Michigan, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Mexico, Texas, Ohio, and Washington. So if you're in any of those states, be sure that you are checking out our website for local chapter events going on in your area, because our ambassadors are killing it right now. And there's camping events and hiking and kayaking and birding and picnics and just all this fun stuff that's happening. And if we don't have a chapter in your area, go over to our website and learn about being an ambassador if you love the outdoors and want to connect our community to it.
There's an event that I'm particularly excited and probably jealous, I guess would be a more accurate word. Just because, to my knowledge, I don't think any of our ambassadors have done this yet or before. But coming up in October, they're doing a haunted hike to kind of embrace the fall Halloween spooky season. And I'm like, that's genius. And I'm just envious of those who get to participate. That's
We
right.
have
my
some
alley.
really cool October events coming up, especially focused around Halloween, which again, is new just because we have so many ambassadors now. I think we are over 40 now. So
Gee whiz.
it's going good.
That's awesome.
Well, let's dive in with our guest. I'm going to do a little bit of an intro.
Sorry. You'll see why that's funny here in a minute.
Inside joke.
You're totally going to laugh with me. I promise. Maybe not.
Probably not. Okay. Nova West is a creative artist, award-winning filmmaker, published photographer, and environmental educator originating from southern Minnesota. Currently based out of San Diego, California, their passion lies in exploring our natural world and finding creative ways to inspire others to jump in. They also finished their first independent film, Diving for Rays, that we're going to talk about. That sounds super exciting. So I just want to welcome Nova to our podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so stoked to be here.
Awesome. Well, we are so stoked to have you here. And I think that our listeners are going to get a lot out of this episode and hopefully really be inspired, which I think they will.
So real quick, I'm going to jump in. Is stoked California lingo, or is that okay? So I know that's sort of like surfer lingo. I know GoPro uses that in a lot of their branding. So you just used it in an actual conversation, Nova. To your knowledge, where does that come from?
That's so funny because like I grew up in Minnesota. I've been using it my whole life. I'm stoked about everything. So I don't know. Like, maybe there's the inner Californian all along. And like now I've finally gone to my homeland of California or something. But
You've arrived.
I've arrived. Yeah. But I've always thought it was universal. So I'm learning something new.
It's been your homing beacon. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm trying to think if I hear people say it here in Texas. I don't think it's a big Texas thing, but yeah. But maybe it'll become one now. We'll see. Well, anyways, let's move past being stoked and dive into this. So we would love to learn who is Nova West. So give us a little rundown on you.
Yeah. So thank you for the amazing intro. My name is Nova West. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a wildlife filmmaker specializing in underwater cinematography. So I do all things ocean. I also work on a deep sea exploration vessel as a video engineer. So I get to literally see the bottom of the ocean through the eyes of deep sea submersibles, essentially. So I get to control the eyeballs of that operation, which is really fun.
Cool.
So all things ocean. I'm your like, I always tell people I'm like your resident fish person. So,
well, your first part made me feel way unqualified to be interviewing you, and then when you put it like that, I'm like, oh, okay, they are a fish person, so I feel a little bit more like I'm in my element, maybe.
Right. I'm so human. Like, don't worry. I do cool things, but that's just by happenstance. Like, I don't know. We all chase our dreams, right?
Can I interrupt?
So.
Yes, but can I interrupt and ask you, and you can tell me if questions are off, but can I ask how old you are?
Okay, before I answer that, you have to tell me how old you think I am.
Oh, I knew that was coming, because that's what always comes, right?
I mean, you're not the first to ask me, so. I
feel like you are very young. I'm going to go with, sorry, for our listeners, we are on video chat, so we can see them versus where you can't. But I am going to go with 20... 25 is what I'm going to go with. Patrick, what are you going with?
I was going to guess early 20s, like 23, 24 ballpark.
Nice. So I'll say I have what me and others in my community like to call one, trans magic, and two, the trans baby face. So I definitely appear a lot younger than I actually am, which is both to my advantage and my detriment, depending on where I exist in the world and who I'm around. But I'm actually 29, so I've been in the industry for about 6 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Awesome. All right. Well, still, for everything you've accomplished at age 29, it's pretty amazing.
Very cool.
So, yeah, let's roll a little bit more with who you are. Like, what was it like growing up? And yeah, share a little bit about that. You're coming out, finding your identity. However deep you would like to go with it, because our listeners, we have a wide variety of listeners. We even have listeners that aren't out, that don't feel like they could ever even come out, and they kind of live through our guest. And we have other people. We have a wide range of people in the LGBTQI community that listen, when we have straight allies that listen. So we want it to be very educational, not just on the outside aspect of it, but as to insight in the LGBTQ community as well, and others that might still be closeted and trying to figure things out for them. So we'd love to be able to hear as much as you'd like to share with us about that.
Totally. Yeah. So I grew up in small town Minnesota. So as anyone who has an ounce of an idea of what like geography might look like in the States, Minnesota is not near an ocean.
But you have a lot of lakes.
Lots of lakes, yeah, 10,000 plus lakes, which is how I got my start as a resident fish person. So you got to start somewhere. Very fortunate to have lakes, and there's a special place in my heart for lakes. But yeah, I grew up in southern Minnesota, and the best way to describe my hometown is it's pretty much like an island surrounded by corn. So it's really like you're isolated. It's a small town, and there's just like livestock and corn around you. It's pretty magical and pretty weird and surreal at the same time. Every time I visit home, I'm always like, is this where I grew up? Like, is this what made the person that's here now? Is it like some strange recipe? But yeah, I love my hometown. But yeah, so growing up, I've always been what I like to call a nature queer. Like I've always been looking at nature from a lens of believing that there's more than what meets the eye and what I'm told is there. And so I've always kind of like approached nature from a curious standpoint of like, okay, yeah, I know scientists tell me this, this, and this about these species, but like, is there more that we're not seeing? You know, and that's kind of been my lens across looking at wildlife in general with my work as well. There's so many gay animals out there that we don't talk about. So growing up, yeah, I was fascinated with nature and wildlife. And as you mentioned, 10,000 lakes, I was always swimming. I was that kid who like wouldn't get out of the pool unless my lips were blue and my parents were like, it's time to go. Like you need medical attention. But yeah, I didn't see the ocean until I was in 4th grade. And that one time that I saw it, I was terrified by it because I was like, what is this like salty thing that's attacking me right now? Like, all of a sudden there's things I can't step on. And like, I don't know, it was weird. So this is a whole other like timeline, but I didn't really get involved in like ocean work until like 2018. So fairly recently. But yeah, going back to like my hometown and growing up and things like that. I grew up in a family that is Roman Catholic. So for those people who are familiar with kind of the religious trauma that comes with being in a really strictly religious households, I experienced a lot of that stuff. And like coming out just wasn't an option in my mind, I guess. Like it wasn't even like a thought I allowed myself to entertain. And my parents were like pretty relaxed as parents come in a Roman Catholic household compared to others. But there were certainly some like subtle, like homophobic remarks and things happening that kind of solidified for me and my siblings. I'm the middle of 3. Yeah, solidified that like that's not tolerated. That's not okay. That's not supported. And I have an older brother and we are very close. And he, surprise, is also trans and also queer. Oh, wow. So there's two out of the three are queer and trans, which is just a blessing. And I know what a blessing is, trust me. But so him and I kind of went through our childhood together. And even though we didn't have the language or the self-awareness or the resources or the role models to really know what either of us were going through, we always kind of saw each other for who we were. And there was a lot of like, we didn't need to explain ourselves to each other, if that made sense. So growing up, I was like, I kind of have like two different coming out stories. One is like more sexuality and like attraction related. One is more gender expression and identity related. But they kind of happen at the same time, and it's kind of hard to, separate them. Sure. But in general, I was pretty closeted until I was a senior in high school. And that's when I like really started to be like, oh God, I'm so gay. Like women are just amazing. And like, and at the time I hadn't realized much about gender identity stuff. And like, when I was a kid, like a young kid, there are so many things that I see now that I'm like, oh my God, that kid's so trans, like, like I hated wearing dresses, like the classic, like I wanted to do boy things, quote unquote, like all those things. And like I today identify as non-binary, but when you grow up in a binary world, you think that there's only two options. And so I was like, yes, man, that is me. I am sir, because the other option is less good. So I was kind of like trying to figure out those two things at the same time without having words for them or even knowing if that was like a real life thing that I could do, like I barely knew if like being gay / queer / like in a homosexual relationship was even an option, let alone like, being trans and non-binary and gender expansive and things like that. So my brother and I, like kind of grew up together with that weight of knowing there was something off, but not being able to express it or like understand what it was. And it's just a general hardship with life. I remember when I was a senior in high school, my brother when I was a junior in high school, my brother finally came out to me and was like, hello, I am queer. And I was like, okay, cool. Knew that.
Did he know about you at this point?
He didn't know. He had no idea. Like, again, like we understood each other, but like there wasn't,
it was never
we didn't
spoken
have words. And so for him, unfortunately, he was strongly discouraged to come out to me and my sister. His entire life. Like he knew he was queer from when he was in kindergarten. Like he's the gayest man I've ever met. But like my parents were very, very much afraid that like him coming out to me and my sister would quote unquote turn us gay, one of those classic scenarios. And so we didn't talk about it and he wasn't really allowed to talk about it. And so when he came out to me when I was in high school, I was like, obviously I know that, but it was also revolutionary to like hear him say it, And so the next year, my senior year, I'm having a really rough time. Like I'm jostling all these things in my brain and trying to figure out like, have I just had a crush on my best friend for 6 years and like not been able to, I just really like her. She's just so cool, like one of those things. And so, of course, as you do, I was dating boys at the time and like just trying to like pray the gay away kind of a thing. And I saw what, my brother had to go through and him having to deal with a lot of family stuff and like a lot of disappointment from my family and a lot of, just like people not understanding him. And I really didn't want to go through that. And I was so afraid that I was going to be a disappointment. So I like really waited till the 11th hour to even come out to myself. And when I did, I was actually dating this guy at the time who is like # the best ally ever. I literally like broke up with him by coming out to him, and he was like, "Cool, you want to be friends? Like, this is great." Like,
that's awesome.
You know, he's super sweet, and like he like drove me to our nearby lake, as Minnesota has many, and we like sat there and just like talked in my car for hours and processed it. And
wow.
For like the next few months, my like final few months of high school, he ended up like pretending to still be dating me so that I could stay closeted for my family and not like raise any red flags, which was like huge. And one day, like as a quote unquote date, he quote unquote kidnapped me and like did the whole 9 in front of my parents, like put a little pillowcase over my head and be like, I'm going to take them on a date, you know, and like do this whole thing. Like didn't have to be that far out. And he actually, instead of obviously taking me on a date, he drove me up to my brother, who was now in college and like about an hour drive away. And I didn't have a car that could go that far and stuff like that. And drove me to my brother so I could come out to him. And it was one of the most just incredible experiences. And I still thank him to this day for
what a beautiful person.
Number 1 ally badge for sure.
Yeah, no kidding.
Agreed.
But yeah, so I came out to my brother and he kind of had the same reaction that I had to him of like, yeah, duh. Like, we know this. So it was kind of cool where like my brother was able to pave that path for me as far as coming out, like sexuality attraction wise, coming out to my parents and family. And like, he was kind of my role model for knowing how to do it and like what it means and having those conversations with people, and like bracing myself for whatever reactions that they may or may not have. So yeah. And then I went to college, and that's where like the gender identity timeline really picks up, because all of a sudden, for the first time in my life, I'm surrounded by trans people. Because surprise, colleges tend to have a lot of different people from a lot of different places.
Yep.
So I ended up like trying on different names and trying on different pronouns and trying on different clothes and like dating different people of different gender identities. And it was honestly the most amazing thing. Like I was going through a lot, but like I wouldn't be my amazing little self now if I didn't have that time to experiment. So, and eventually I came out to my parents also as trans, which was even harder, believe it or not, than coming out as just queer in general. So I ended up coming out to them as queer in general, like right before I left for college. It was fine. They were sad about it. It was a bummer for everybody, but like we moved on, you know, I moved somewhere else. I didn't have to think about it. Suddenly I'm surrounded by queer people. And then I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. I'm non-binary. Great. This is amazing. And also like, what am I going to tell my family? You know?
Right. Yeah.
Oh, by the way.
Yeah.
Part 2.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Like you thought one was enough. No.
But wait,
and actually both of us are coming out to you twice. It's a whole triple whammy here. I like to joke now that like my family, for me and my siblings, like I have my older brother who's a trans man. There's me who's non-binary, and then there's my sister who's a cis woman. So we kind of have like this gender spectrum, which is fun.
Yeah.
So,
Does your family all get along well and fairly accepting?
Well enough. There's still a lot of homophobia that comes with just like growing up in a small town, and my family for several generations have grown up and lived in that same town. So everyone knows my family knows everybody. Like it's really tight. And so like to have queer kids, there's a lot of community members who also don't support you. And so it took a long time for my family to wrap their brains around like, oh, life can be lived in a different way and it's not bad, you know, like that kind of thing. But also like recognizing that the people around them weren't supporting them in the way that they needed. Like a lot of people were imposing their thoughts about queerness on, you know, the experience rather than asking like, this seems hard. Like, how can I support you? You know, like that kind of a thing. so it took them a long time to come around. Like now my family uses my name and sometimes my pronouns, and I've been legally Nova for like 6 years, I think 7 years.
Yeah.
You know, it takes time, but
Totally. Yeah,
I could only imagine.
I feel like there's a lot of baby steps, but I feel like using your name is a pretty monumental deal.
It is. Yeah. And I remember the first time my dad used my name, my jaw was on the floor. I was like, I never expected him to use it. And like, my brother was such an incredible ally. So the fun thing about my brother and I is we kind of like slingshotted. So like he paved the way for like coming out as queer, and then I paved the way for coming out as trans, and he came out as trans after I did.
Okay.
So I didn't have a script for how my parents were going to respond to that bit. And so when my dad started using my name, I fully wasn't expecting that would ever happen. So pretty monumental.
That's great. Yeah. No, I not to dive down my story because people have heard it before listening, but I grew up in a small town too, and all of that just like resonates with me so much. So I totally can relate to a lot of that and could imagine what that would be like. So I'm glad your parents are at least moving forward, even if it is baby steps, because like some including mine just they never move at all. And it's just like, okay. So I'm glad to hear that for you, and that you have your siblings to be able to support as well. So that's awesome. Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah. And then you at college, did you go to college for, what did you go to college for?
So I went to college for environmental and outdoor education and like traditional art.
Gotcha.
Nice.
And what took you down the road of videography? You do photography too, but I feel like probably videography, cinematography is probably your biggest thing, it sounds like.
Yeah, right now I'm kind of focusing in like wildlife filmmaking, but I definitely do a bit of both. I'm like, no artistic medium is safe for me. I always want to play with it.
Yes.
So I do all sorts of stuff. But so I basically I started out going to school for arts, and then I was like, I had to work in a factory to put myself through college. And so like it messed up my wrists. And so I couldn't draw for like 8 hours a day. So I decided to switch majors, which actually worked out. So I switched to outdoor education. And by my senior year, one of my professors was like, so Nova, I've noticed that for like every project you're making a film, and like, how would you feel about an internship with Nat Geo, maybe, And I was like, yeah, that's act cool. Okay. Yeah. That'd be great. Yeah. So, long story short, I ended up getting an unofficial internship with Nat Geo. He just happened to know someone who worked there and could help me get a job there. So I moved to Washington, D.C. after I graduated and worked at headquarters for a few years. And that's kind of where I took off from there and was like, oh yeah, I want to do underwater things because I'm a fish person and people belong in the ocean. So
makes perfect sense.
So I love how you plug Nat Geo, but you've also had work that's been on Discovery and Netflix and quite a few other things. Those are probably the biggest maybe that people would recognize off the top, but take us down that road. So you did this unofficial internship with Nat Geo, and then where did things go from there? Yeah,
so the really spicy bit about me working at Nat Geo is so I'm one of those queers where like I'm always organizing. So like in college, I was like one of the board members for our like college pride group. I was like part of our speakers bureau, like when I was in high school, I was doing that too. And so like at Nat Geo, like fresh out of college was like, where is my queer community? Surprise, there was no organized like employee resource group at the time. So I was doing my normal day job. You know, I was working on a TV show called The Incredible Dr. Pol, which is great time.
Prolapse uterus show is what Patrick calls it. Like, there's always a prolapse uterus.
Oh God, my favorite thing is when they were hiring me, they were like, "So how's your stomach? How strong is your stomach?" I'm like, I think I'm fine. I don't know. I grew up, like, my dad's a farmer. Like, I've seen some stuff. And they were like, honestly, I think you'll be fine. Like, I can eat a meatloaf and watch a prolapse at the same time and I'm fine. So I think you'll be great. I'm like, great, awesome, done. Like, you got the job.
That's awesome.
Farm kid. So
what were you doing on the show? What were you
I was a assistant editor. So I started out in post-production, editing and like cutting small sequences and stuff like that. But me being me, so I'm a creature that doesn't do well in a box. And so I was spending all my time in an office. And so circling back to the employee resource group, I met another trans person at Nat Geo, which, like, you meet one, you gotta like become best friends, right? Right. We went in the elevator and we're like, trans? Yes, great.
I love that.
And we started talking about the resources that was lacking at the office, that we're like, you know what, like, as queer and trans people, we could really use these things and this support from the organization. And so we ended up like building from the ground up this pride group for Nat Geo, basically. And we ended up being co-chairs for a few years. So like, I had my normal day job, but it, like, my brain just wasn't stimulated enough. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to be the leader of the gays at Nat Geo.
Yes.
Put that on your resume. That's
awesome. Right. Leader of the gays.
At Nat Geo. You got to be sure to drink with the Nat Geo.
Yes, not all of the gays. But
well, I think that if I was going to be a leader of the gays, I think being the leader of the gays at Nat Geo would probably be one of the most fun ones.
Nature queers. I mean, like, it's a win.
Exactly.
I don't know if I would want to be a leader of all the gays. That sounds like too much drama for me.
That's too much.
I think that's Beyonce anyway. So.
Right.
Might be.
Oh my God. Beyonce and Lizzo.
If you're looking for high-quality tents, sleeping bags, or backpacks at a price you can afford, well, look no further. We're proud to partner with Sierra Designs, a leading provider of innovative outdoor gear. Outside of offering high-quality, premier outdoor apparel and gear, Sierra Designs supports game-changing organizations like LGBT Outdoors. To learn more, visit their website, sierradesigns.com, and enter code LGBT Outdoors to receive 25% off your entire purchase. Take your indoors outdoors with Spacious Skies Campgrounds, a collection of 15 campgrounds and RV parks spanning the eastern United States. Each location is unique, but all offer the perfect escape to the great outdoors if you're looking to spend quality time with your friends and family, or simply need a scenic home base for your nearby adventures. Choose from RV sites, cabins, yurts, retro RV rentals, or tent sites, and enjoy on-site amenities that offer convenience, creature comforts, and fun. Visit SpaciousSkiesCampgrounds.com for more information and easy online booking. We welcome and invite all campers to camp on with Spacious Skies Campgrounds.
All right, so then you were working on The Incredible Dr. Pol and becoming the leader of the gays at Nat Geo. Where did we go from there?
Yeah, so I was basically working there for a while. Like I said, I don't do well in a box. I don't do well in like a 9-to-5 office space. And even though I was doing like wildlife adjacent things, I was like, there's so much more out there. And I am just sitting here looking at a screen, you know, and like I had the dream job, but I still wasn't satisfied with it. And so me with my, you know, actual savings account for the first time in my life was like, I'm going to become a scuba diver. Because so in Nat Geo headquarters, there's 2 buildings and they're connected by a tunnel underneath. And this tunnel has like all sorts of like our gear room and all that fun stuff. But in this tunnel, Nat Geo being Nat Geo, they were like, we're going to make it as cool as the upstairs stuff. It's not going to be a creepy tunnel. And so they like plastered it with all of these photos of like Nat Geo explorers. And on that wall is my favorite icon, Dr. Sylvia Earle, who is the goddess of the ocean. If you don't know of her, look her up. She's incredible. And I've gotten to work with her a little bit, and she kind of is one of the people that inspired me to get into ocean filming and stuff like that. But so I'd like walk by this wall every single day, and at one point I just like looked at it and I saw this guy with like a rebreather, which is like a scuba diving apparatus, and I was like, there's no one on this wall that's like me. Like, there's no one on this wall that's so clearly trans and non-binary. And two, like, what's stopping me from doing what they're doing? Like, that looks a lot more fun than looking at a computer screen. Like, that day, I went up to my computer screen and I changed my desktop background to like a scuba diver with this giant aggregation of fish. I was like, that's going to be me one day. And then, like,
Nice.
Yeah. So I decided to get dive certified. And if you're familiar with Washington, D.C., there's like no clean ocean nearby. So I like trained in a rock quarry, and that was like cold and, you know, not fun, but
Dark.
Yeah. And like muddy and gross. But like I got to play underwater basketball. So that's fun.
Wow.
Right on.
So once I got my dive certification, I kind of, you know, kept my head down and kept working and like building up a savings account. For anyone that's like familiar with dipping into the filmmaking world in general, you kind of have to have some sort of camera to really like learn on. And at that point, like I had taken maybe one photography class in college. Like I really didn't have much of a formal education on how to do camera things. So I was like, okay, saving up for a camera, gonna see what I can do with that first and like kind of teaching myself how to do things. So yeah, and then kind of what like, you know, springboarded me from there was I'm just a really lucky person. I don't know. Basically, so because of the Pride group that I mentioned, and because of the very memorable name that I happened to name myself.
Good choice.
Thank you. Everyone knew me because of this employee resource group that worked with so many different people from different aspects of Nat Geo. And I couldn't remember other people's names, which was really sad, but I tried. But everyone's like, Nova, hey, how you doing? And it worked to my favor because Nat Geo was staffing up for an expedition to search for Amelia Earhart's plane casually.
Oh, wow.
And they're like, man, we really need like an onboard editor to like send media back from the ship that they're going to do the expedition on. Who could we possibly contract that likes the ocean and does editing? I was like, me!
Yes.
So,
you're like, do you really have to ask? Like,
right. I was like, hey, Chad, I know we've been across the office this entire time. Let me introduce myself. Here's a coffee. Like, it ended up working out where they're like, yeah, this kid knows what they're talking about. They hired me. I left the country for the first time. Little old small town Minnesota me leaving the country for the first time. Wow. This was 2019 on a big Nat Geo expedition to look for Amelia Earhart's plane. Like 3 days trip from Samoa, like middle of the ocean, on an island called Nikamororo. So it was wild time.
That seems so surreal, I bet.
It was so surreal. And like first time leaving the country, like the more I travel, the more I realize like I know nothing about this planet. And like, you know, growing up in a small town, you were taught that like the way that you live life is the only and best way to live life. You know, it's a very colonist perspective, especially in like white suburbia, right?
Yep.
And leaving the US, I was like, oh my God, I know nothing. And like I got to meet Samoans for the first time, and they're incredible, you know? And like, there's, I remember like I didn't research the country I was going to before I did that. Bad idea, especially for queer people. There are lots of homophobic countries. But I learned that Samoa has a third legal gender called Fa'afafine. And like, I didn't know that until I got there. I'm like, these other countries haven't figured out. What are you doing, America? You know?
Right.
So anyway.
That's amazing.
yeah, so I basically ended up on this wild adventure to look for Amelia Earhart's plane, and like it was my first time at sea. I was so seasick. I was like at sea for 3 weeks and like didn't touch land for 3 weeks.
Wow.
And going from like, didn't even know what the ocean was, only saw cornfield, to suddenly I'm in the middle of the ocean and there's no leaving. It was quite a jump. But the really fun part of that story is the vessel that we were on happens to be the EV Nautilus, which is now the vessel that I contract with as a deep sea video engineer. So
wow,
it just kind of, took off from there.
How cool.
Talk about somebody that like has these dreams and chases them. But not only that, just like everything just like falls right in place for you. Like that's awesome. I'm so beyond excited and happy for you that, not even 30 years old and all of this has taken place already. Like that's amazing. I can only imagine where you're going to be in another 5 years, another 10 years.
Oh, I'm going to be like, I don't know, living on the bottom of the ocean, maybe. I don't know.
Right. You're going to have your photo in the tunnel at National Geographic.
Yes,
like
that is the goal.
Yes, that's for sure. Like, I believe that's going to happen. I believe that's going to happen. Cool. So I would love to talk about some of the major projects that you've worked on. One that I am a little bit more familiar with is the Diving for Rays. So I'm not sure if we want to jump into that one, but 2 or 3 of your favorite projects that you've worked on, I'd love to be able to talk about them and how people can be able to check them out.
Yeah. Let's start with Diving for Rays. I feel like that's the one we've been like alluding to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Diving for Rays is my first independent documentary. I've been in documentary filmmaking for about 6 years, and I figured it's about time I start telling stories I want to tell. So I ended up meeting 2 of my best friends, Angel and Nicole Morris, who Angel is another queer non-binary wildlife filmmaker. And when we met, we were like, oh my God, I've never seen another person like me in the field, So it was instant connection. And then their wife, Nicole, is marine biologist in training. So we all met up and we're like, we need to make a documentary because queer people need to tell their own stories. That's what we're missing in media. And every storyline that we see about queer people in mainstream media is always about the struggle of being queer. And I'm so sick of it. It's hard, but it's hard because other people make it hard. Why are we only talking about that when queerness is beautiful and colorful and vibrant and so much more than pain and suffering, right? It's joy and liberation. And so that's part of why I'm starting to make my own films is I'm like, I don't see the films that I want to see. And I'm exhausted every time I watch a queer film in the mainstream media. So why not make one that brings me joy and gives me energy instead?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, there's a deficit for sure, but I'm working to fill that gap. So Diving for Rays, we basically, Angel and I were like, what should we make a film on? I don't know, a parrot or something, or and we're like, wait,
Nicole.
Right. Yeah. What if we make a film about Nicole, who's becoming a marine conservationist and is so queer, and just talking about their story of how they got from point A to point B and their roadblocks, but ultimately the joy of being a queer person in that space and how liberating it is to chase after your dream as a queer person. So that's kind of the gist of Diving for Rays. We basically follow Nicole's story, becoming a marine conservationist, and tying that in with self-doubt and homophobia and how they deal with that and get through that to find this really beautiful, liberating space. So the film, it kind of has 2 purposes. One is to obviously the classic show allies where they need to be allying, where they can help us and do better and open doors for queer people.
Yeah.
And the other is to show queer people that you can do the thing, whatever it is you want to do, you can do the thing. And for those who want to get involved in ocean conservation, this is how Nicole did it. Here's an example, do the thing.
Yeah. So. That's awesome. We need you at some point to connect us with Nicole, because I would love to get Nicole on the podcast as well.
Yes.
Or if Nicole, if you're listening.
Like, I think I might get to Nicole before the podcast.
Probably so. Probably so.
Oh,
Nova's already signed you up, so.
Oh, and I know they would be so stoked. So stoked. Gosh, now I can't.
The film has been doing great at the film festivals. Like,
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Because
So
obviously we want to shed light on queer people, queer filmmakers, queer people going after their dreams, and obviously the film is doing great. So we want to hear about that. Like,
yeah,
what's the response been?
it's been overwhelmingly positive. So leading up to the official release of the film, well, actually, I'm going to back up a second. So Angel was fully in edit mode while I was at sea. Like we had finished filming the documentary, and then a few months later I went to sea for 71 days. And during that time, they were like, you know what? I'm editing this entire documentary. I was like, I can help you just when I get home. They're like, no, it's happening now. So the fun result of that was actually they ended up finishing it while I was at sea. They sent me the final cut of it, and I got to premiere it for the very first time at sea. Its first ever showing was actually in the middle of the ocean near Papahanaumokuakea, Hawaii National Marine Monument. So, and I got to show all sorts of like big Nat Geo people. There are a lot of Nat Geo explorers on the ship at the time, including Dr. Robert Ballard, who is the man who found the Titanic and the man who owns the EV Nautilus, which is the ship I work on.
Okay.
So he got to see it among my peers, colleagues, everybody. And it was, I like, you know, showed that it's only 22 minutes, but we pack a lot in there, you know, and like after the 22 minutes, I look around and like half of my coworkers are like in tears, and like there's so many people there that I could just tell felt seen by it. And it meant the world that like beyond queer people, which obviously is our target audience, even the people that aren't in the queer community felt seen by the concept and the storyline around like having a dream and not chasing it because society tells you not to. So there's something for everybody in Diving for Rays.
So cool.
But since then, we officially released it on Water Bear Network, which is a free conservation-oriented streaming platform. So we got a deal with them, and now it's free to stream. You can sign up today, and it's it's great.
Yeah, we're going to get a link and make sure that that's in the show notes so that all of our amazing listeners can go check it out.
Yes, please. And I have on my website, I have an entire page dedicated to Diving for Rays, and it has our trailer on it. It has all the film festivals and awards that it's been to. There's some like BTS photos on there and all that jazz. So feel free to check that out too at novawestcreative.com. And almost forgot my website.
That's awesome. What are some of your other projects that you've worked on that have been kind of your favorites or been special to you?
Yeah, so there are a few that are kind of in the works under NDA right now. So unfortunately, I can't tell you about the like really queer ones that I'm working on right now. But I can tell you that one is kind of circling queer animals, which is so needed. Like we talk about, like if you think of like the classic BBC David Attenborough documentaries, like they leave out so much science that is queer. And it really is to our detriment, because if we're talking about conserving nature and like, you know, preventing extinction and things like that, we need to understand the holistic view on these animals, not just the ones that fit our scope.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're tackling in that, is talking a little bit about the science that we don't get to hear, kind of a thing.
That sounds amazing.
That's important.
Yeah. So
very cool.
Yeah.
Another one is about a trans mountain climber who is summiting all 7 summits. And her goal is essentially to climb to the top of these mountaintops and where shadows don't exist, and kind of spread the message that she won't hide as a trans woman. So that one is...
You might not be able to say this. Are you able to say who that is?
It's a gray area, so I'm going to not.
Sure.
But keep an eye on my socials, because if I can, I'll be talking about it there.
Okay. I just wonder if I know who it is, but
there's a strong possibility. The community is small.
I have a good suspicion. But anyways, yeah.
So
awesome. That
one's in the works. And then one that is also in the works is kind of about like queer camps and queer summer camps. So this past summer, I got to finally, for the first time, volunteer at Camp Brave Trails, which, for those who are not familiar with Camp Brave Trails, it's an all queer leadership camp that happens every summer in California and in Maryland. And as an adult, you can volunteer in so many different scopes, from like a camp counselor to a photographer, which is what I did, to camp nurse, like social media, all sorts of stuff.
That's amazing. And is the campers youth? What age are the campers?
Campers are youth. I was the photographer, not
that's okay. But
I remember what the youngest is. I know the oldest is up to 17, and then you can become a junior counselor essentially after that. I want to say the youngest is 10, but I would have to fact check that one.
Yeah.
But pretty wide scope, enough to like have so many different cabins of different age groups, and it really is just a beautiful experience to be able to see so many different kids exploring queerness at so many different ages and different points in their lives. And that's kind of where that inspiration from the for that doc came from, and collaborating with some other people who had the idea first, so I can't claim all of it, but
very cool.
Yeah.
Wow. Nice. So much cool stuff.
So much. Like, I could talk more about wildlife stuff too, but I figured y'all want to hear about the queer stuff first.
I've always wondered this. Justin and therefore I watch a lot of nature documentaries. America the Beautiful. Like, if it's on Nat Geo, we've probably seen it. And especially, say, within the last 10 years, just looking strictly at the videography, like the shots that they're able to get with motion, and like you're tracking a herd of bison, but you're seeing like their hoofs. And I know this isn't water, but like, how long are the videographers sitting out there or hiding? I know there's a lot of remote stuff, but like, how many cards are they burning through a day, keeping their camera on? Like, there's got to be a technique, but there's got to be a lot of patience. And that's why I am not well suited to be a wildlife videographer. Like, okay, where are the animals? Let's go. Like, we're here.
You called action. There's no action.
Right.
We're trying to tell a story to save your species. The least you can do is cooperate a little bit.
Right. I brought snacks even. Like, come on. Yeah, that's totally fair question. So it obviously depends on like the species you're looking to capture and what their behavior looks like and how used to human beings they are and all that jazz. A good example I can kind of set is this summer was on an expedition on the island of Niue for National Geographic, and I was there for an entire month. We had a lot of different things to film, so we weren't filming like one animal for the entire month, but we were covering a lot of natural history. And depending on what you want to cover, like sometimes you do have to sit in a blind for days just to see the behavior that you want to capture on film. Mm-hmm. So, it's kind of a non-answer of it depends, but most of my shoots and expeditions range from 2 weeks to 2 months. It just really depends. But yeah, so fortunately I also work in the field as like a digital imaging technician, which essentially is a glorified media manager. So I see exactly to the gigabyte, to the megabyte, how much footage is coming in and the number of cards. And usually for main cameras, you're getting like 2 to 4 cards a day, which can hold up to like, oh gosh, some can hold up to 2 terabytes each card.
Jeez.
Wow.
So there's a lot.
And that's why I don't edit.
Right. God, my last shoot, we had 80 terabytes of drive space, and we almost filled it.
Wow. And like that's going through dailies and kind of cutting out what you need, or are you bringing everything back home?
It's a bit of both. So depending on the shoots, I, of course, much prefer to be shooting. But especially in this economy, sometimes I'll do the DIT work. And in that case, sometimes they'll ask me to do field editing. So I'll like pull selects of my favorite shots from the day, or I'll like put together an underwater string out where it's like, these are all the best shots from the underwater cameras. But sometimes they just want me to copy the footage, log it, make sure we know it's all there, and then it goes home with us to the editors, and they deal with, doing the string outs and stuff like that.
Right on.
That's amazing.
So when you have the opportunity to, you shoot underwater. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I do all of it. There's no creative medium that's safe from Nova West. There's also no, biome that's safe from Nova West. Like I shoot aerial, I shoot topside lands, like whether it's the tundra or the tropics, I shoot underwater. But my favorite is underwater, so I specialty in underwater filmmaking.
Like I can see myself not being an underwater video artist, but if my job takes me down, in the depths of the ocean, there's whales and schools of fish, and you're getting like those gorgeous beams of sun maybe shooting through. Like how often do you just like zone out and have like these moments of awe because like 99% of the world does not ever see anything like this, and you get to bring that to them, but you're seeing that like through your lens, but also with your own eyes. And like that is I feel like would be this huge moment of magic that would just overwhelm you.
Yeah, absolutely. I have like a few different tangential answers for this one, because it's always on the front of my brain. I'm so in love with the ocean. I think it's so magical. So like I'm always thinking about it, whether I'm in it or not. So I'm someone who is very neurodivergent and like has a lot going on. And I didn't realize until I became a scuba diver that the only thing that quiets my brain down is scuba diving. I'm never more zen than when I'm under the water listening to myself breathe. And it's like, I've told people so often, I'm like, if you want to get me a Christmas gift or like birthday or something, get me a sound machine that sounds like a scuba diver breathing underwater. That'll put me to sleep. Like it's so chill. So I zen out all the time. I almost fell asleep underwater one time, like we all do it. It's, whatever, but it's genuinely the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced as a human being, is just being in this other world that we were never physiologically meant to spend that much time in. And there's something beautiful about knowing the rules just enough to break them, and like being underwater, I know my limits physically, and I know like, if I do this, I will die. And if I don't do this, I will die. And if I do this, I get to experience this amazing place, and there's something really just beautiful. And I think queerness also does that, kind of defying the rules of humanity and what we think human beings are supposed to be, So for me, those two things are tied. I also firmly believe that water in all its forms, but especially the ocean, can be a healing space for marginalized communities. And that's usually the first thing that access is cut off to when oppressing marginalized groups. So that happens a lot with indigenous communities, unfortunately, where like the government loves to cut off their water supplies or not give them clean water. And like similarly, so much of development happens on our coasts, and it's really hard for people in poverty to access, you know, the beaches and oceans and things like that because it's too expensive. So there's so many different reasons why like we're lacking access across so many different communities. But as a queer community, at least for myself, it's always been really hard to access water in a way that I could be free, you know, and that I could be my whole self. Like as a trans person, there's dysphoria. And obviously I went through a period of pretty extreme poverty and like couldn't afford to see water in the ocean, even though it was in my backyard. And so scuba diving is something that, although it is a very expensive activity to do, and it's a privilege to say that I do it, having access to water in any shape or form can be healing with the right tools and the right company and lots of things. Like obviously, a lot of different groups of people have trauma around water and access to water and being in water, like knowing how to swim and things like that can be a hurdle. But with the right access, I think it can be a really beautiful space for people to heal wounds from society, from themselves, from their families, things like that. So for me, scuba diving is kind of my like happy place. No one can talk to me when I'm underwater. Go through Instagram when I'm underwater. It's just me and this puffer fish that's like staring me down. You know, it's great.
I love it.
That's amazing. That's so cool.
Yeah. But I would love to tell y'all about like my most magical moments underwater, because I feel like it kind of ties into this sense of, you know, the ocean is magical. I'm so in love with it. I aim to be the number one spokesperson for the ocean one day, you know?
Yeah.
But when I was on that expedition with Nat Geo this summer, of course, again, as a corn person, I've never seen a whale. So, and even though I work in the ocean, there's so much wildlife I have yet to see. Like I've never seen a great manta ray, and that's like my favorite ocean creature, you know, like there's so much I have yet to explore, and my job is the only way I can do it. Like I can't afford to do it otherwise. So like might as well have Nat Geo pay for it, you know?
Thanks, Nat Geo.
Right. Thanks. But this summer I was free diving and just kind of helping the underwater team with filming one day near the reefs of Niue. And they had been working with some humpback whales just to like film them and catch kind of the tail end of like, I don't know if you would call it pupping season for whales or like calving season, maybe. I think it's calving season. So we caught the tail end of calving season with the whales. So like, you know, mother whales and their young and things like that is really beautiful. And like I, as the digital imaging technician, am not the go-to person to be filming the whales. Like I was just there to kind of help. And I was really like homesick for these whales. I really wanted to meet them, you know. I just like something was calling me to like meet a whale, you know. And I do think there's something to be said for meeting aquatic life that's bigger than yourself. It's like standing on a balcony at the top of an apartment building in a busy city. It just gives you a different perspective and like kind of makes you feel small in a way. And like it's really healthy, I think, to do activities that make you feel a different proportion to what you normally are. So for me, meeting a whale was like calling to me. And so I was free diving, and one of the guys I was working with was like, "Hey, look, there's like the humpbacks. They're right there. They're not very far." I was like, Can we go see them, please? Like, I must meet one. And he was like, yeah, I'll take you. Let's go. And so we're like kicking as fast as we can. And I had like little rental fins, like little baby fins. For those who are unfamiliar with freediving fins, usually like touristy snorkel fins are like maybe a foot long. Like they're not long. Freediving fins are usually length of like foot to hip. So they're very long, and they propel you a lot faster with less work. So I had the baby fins. Did not help. But so we're like kicking out to these whales, and I can see them on the surface. But when I dipped my head underwater, I couldn't see them because they're just that far away and that giant that the visibility didn't reach that far. And there was at least 100 feet of visibility. And we're kicking, and I'm like, oh man, I'm not going to meet this whale, am I? Like, I'm so bummed. And so we pause for a second. We're both like, okay, we swam quite a way out from shore. It's dangerous to be this far out because of boat traffic. Like, we should probably turn around. And I was all defeated. I'm like, okay, like another day, one day we will meet. It's okay. Hello, whale. I will see you someday. And right before we go to turn around, the guy that I was kicking out there with was like, you should go under the surface, actually, like follow me. And so he dives down about 30 feet and just sits there and beckons me from underneath to swim down to him. So I do my little duck dive like you do, and I'm swimming down. And then he just like did the stop signal with his hands. I like looked around and I'm like, oh my God, like what? Like, is there something I should be alarmed about? Which near this island, there were some of the world's most poisonous snakes. Venomous snakes. So I was like, oh God, is like a catuale right behind me or something? And I paused, and all I could hear was surround sound symphonic whale calls and songs. And it was, I couldn't see the whales, but I got to meet them, you know? Oh. And it was by far the most chilling thing I've ever experienced. I was crying under my mask, which isn't great because, like, you know, water in the mask. I was like, this is, oh God. And I replay that moment in my head so often when I'm like, maybe I should, you know, my life is incredible, but this work is also really hard. And like, there's a lot we don't talk about in the glamorization of the work I do. But in those days where I'm like, yeah, maybe I should just do a 9 to 5. I'm like, no, remember the whale call.
Remember the whales.
So I have yet to meet one, but that whale call is like keeping me determined to one day do it. So
keeps calling you back.
Exactly.
That is incredible. Like, I don't even know where we'd go from there. And I don't want to keep you all night, but this, I mean, love hearing these stories. In all your experiences and you know, adventures you've got to experience, for our listeners that are listening, and there's a wide variety of them, like we mentioned before, like, what would be some words of encouragement or inspiration that you could give them, as if they haven't had enough already, but like to like really be able to go after their dreams, whether it's something big or something small, something long-term, something short-term. Like, you've had a lot of, I'm sure, tons of ups and downs and challenges and everything along the way. You know, I'd love, as we wrap this up, just for you to be able to kind of share some nuggets with our listeners.
Yeah. So one thing I try to kind of spread the word on is, like, if you know what you want to do and you don't know how to get there, ask the people who are already doing the thing that you want to do, how they got there, what resources they need, who they can connect you to. You never know. That's kind of how I've been able to wiggle my way into so many of these rooms. Another piece, though, is, so for me, something that kept me from pursuing this field from the get-go is I never saw someone who looked and sounded like me in the field of wildlife filmmaking. You know, like, growing up, all I saw were like cishet white guys behind the camera, you know, out in the wilderness doing the really cool stuff. And there's a lot of barriers for queer people in so many wilderness spaces, which y'all talk about all the time. Is, you know, there's a lot of nuance and things to consider. So something that I've been kind of realizing over the years is, if you don't see someone who looks like you in a place that you want to be, you have to be that person for the next generation, you know?
Oh, that's cool.
And something that kind of like solidified that idea for me was when I was working at Brave Trails. There were so many young queer kids that came up to me and told me I was the first trans adult they had ever seen.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And that destroyed me. And it also gave me fuel. When I was young and, really struggling, y'all heard my coming out story. Like, I didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel, and I was really struggling, and I didn't see a purpose for, continuing in this world that was so harsh. But having that experience and being able to show kids that like it gets better and you can actually do whatever you want. Like, people want you to believe that you can't do whatever you want. So my biggest advice is, like, sometimes you got to be so you can see, which is a thing we say in Diving for Rays too. Go watch the film. But sometimes you do have to be the person you needed when you were younger. And that's how I know I'm on the right track, is I'm becoming that person, which is really full circle. So.
Oh, amazing.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Where can people learn more about you?
So you can check out my website, novawestcreative.com. It has kind of everything you probably want to know about me on there as far as professional work goes. You can see my portfolio, my photography, my reels and stuff like that. You can contact me. If you want to see more of a living portfolio / like day in the life, especially during expeditions, I post a lot on my Instagram, which is NovaWest_creative. And I forever and always welcome people to reach out to me if you have questions about my career, my coming out story, things like that. Even if you want to stop by and say, hey, glad you exist. I love that. But you can find me on both of those platforms.
Well,
Definitely.
I am certainly glad that you exist. This has been such a great experience. Our listeners don't have the privilege of getting to kind of see you face to face. But when you've been talking about these joys and amazing things that you get to do, like you're absolutely lighting up. There's so much joy and peace and excitement in your eyes when you're talking about all this stuff. And this has been a really, really neat conversation for me, just to kind of get the perspective of a queer creative. So thank you so much for sharing everything and for being you. This has been great. Awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. Like, it's been amazing talking with you both. And like, I can talk about the ocean all day. So
Well, I just want to join you on an expedition sometime.
Hey, let's do it.
I mean, I don't even need to be paid. I'll just sit in a corner somewhere and just join you, and like, love to go along.
I mean, if you're ever like on the West Coast, California, come tumble in the ocean with me. Like, like anybody that wants to join, I'll bring you to the ocean and
one
show
day.
you her ways.
Let's make it happen. Let's make it happen one day. So,
absolutely.
Awesome. Noah West, you have been a complete joy to have on our podcast, and I can't wait for our listeners to see what you do next. So thank you again for joining us. And for all of our listeners out there, until next time, get out there.
Thank you again for joining us this week. If you have a campfire conversation story you would like to share, please email it to us at info@lgbtoutdoors.com. Follow us on Instagram at lgbtoutdoors and join the community at facebook.com/groups/lgbtoutdoors. Become a partner by joining our Patreon, where you'll gain access to monthly bonus stories and exclusive content. For more information on today's episode, check out the show notes. For information about LGBT Outdoors, LGBT Outdoor Fest, local chapters, or to sign up for our newsletter, visit lgbtoutdoors.com. And if you're enjoying the show, please rate, review, and follow wherever you listen to podcasts.